food for you and I.
Cook the ingredients for the pie filling separately, and then place it inside the pie dish on top of the pastry base. Wetting the top of it with pastry base, affix the pastry cover to the anarcho pie.
It's really tasty, anarcho pie. Tasting and food for you and I. It's really tasty, anarcho pie. Tasting and food for you and I.
Now comes the important bit. Using the spare bits of pastry, decorate the top of the pie with a pastry anarchy sign, symbolizing our never-ending resistance to the omnicidal system that perverts our lives.
Hey Ashley, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. A couple weeks ago, we had the California fires and all the smoke in there. What have you been doing during this time and with the lockdown and all the fires and smokes and the bad air quality?
Yeah, it's been a lot of sealing myself up inside. I finally spent some money on air purifiers for inside of my house because I was just feeling so crappy with the air quality. But I'm lucky to live in a place that's filled with books and records. I have plenty to do inside, and trying to focus on the stuff that I can do more than the stuff that I can't do, even though it's kind of sad not to be able to hang out and get together with friends like I would like to.
Yeah, same here. Like I live half an hour, 25 minutes away from you. I had the window closed for like 3 days and just have the air filter and stuff like that.
That's all you can do.
Yes. Tell us about some of the compilation you were in on the microcosm.
Yeah, so Microcosm is a publisher that I've worked with a few different times, and they're actually, I think we'll talk about the ones that published my cookbook, but they've got some other really cool things, including a book called Alive with Vigor. And in that one, I've got I call it sort of a comic essay, but it's a short little chapter about sort of loving and being comfortable with your body and ultimately about fat liberation, which I tried to kind of sneak in there a little bit. That's how I identify myself. And I think that that's something that even for people who generally believe in self-love and body positivity can be a little bit hard to crack into. And Alive with Vigor is a book that's for a younger audience, like adolescents and young adults. So that was something I really wanted to introduce in there. And then some other compilations that my work has been in. These are not through Microcosm, but there's a punk comic zine called As You Were. So that was put together by Mitch Clem, probably the most well-known punk comic artist. And I've got some work in a few issues of that too.
How did you get in touch with a Microcosm? Because they also have a small shop in Portland. Am I correct? Because I think I've been there a couple times.
Yeah, so Microcosm is based out of Portland. They've got a little shop or kind of a storefront, part of their warehouse that you can go to. And how I hooked up with them actually was through my zine a long time ago called Barefoot and in the Kitchen. So they're a publisher, but they're also a distributor, and they have been around for a long time distributing tons and tons of zines about all different topics. And they were one of the places that carried mine. So I knew them through that and worked with them directly. I would go make the copies and put together my zines myself and send them to Microcosm. And eventually, after we worked together kind of in that capacity for a long time, they were interested in putting together a book for me. And so that's how we ended up working together on my book, and then all the other things that I've kind of contributed little chapters or little pieces of art to for them.
Your zine, Barefoot and in the Kitchen, how long have you been doing it for? And was the zine only about cooking or?
Yeah, so the zine started in 2005, which feels like a really long time ago now. So I started it actually when I moved away. I moved, from my parents' home and was cooking everything for myself and was able to cook whatever I wanted for myself, my roommates, my friends. And I realized that I was compiling all these really great recipes, and it was stuff that I wished that I had as a young person who was vegan. You know, I went vegan when I was in high school, and at that time there weren't as many resources. It was a lot harder to find stuff. So I started putting, the recipes that I was developing down on paper, and zine format was the most natural format for me. I put it together thinking I'd just give it out to friends and family and maybe take it to shows, trade with other zine makers. So I started doing that 2005, and I did a total of 4 issues of the zine over probably about 5 years.
Then how did it went from zine to a book?
So that again was facilitated by Microcosms. I had gotten to know them through making the zine, and the stuff that they publish often, maybe always, often has a relationship to zines and to zine makers. So they're very much in that DIY space, even though they are actually a publisher themselves. So I had that sort of relationship with them, and they approached me at one point and said, "Hey, what do you think about making a bunch of new recipes and turning it into a book?" So I took on that project, which ended up being, pretty different than making the zine, but they were really cool to work with and helped me all the way through it.
I remember going to Skylight Bookstore in Los Angeles, seeing your book, and I was going, "Oh my gosh!" And I took a picture of it.
Yeah.
Yes. With this book, I noticed you also did a book signing at the Animal Place Vegan Republic in Berkeley, and you had all your baked stuff and all that. Like every time when you do have your book table set up, did you always have your food and snacks and all that?
Yeah, I try to always have some food with me. I think, first of all, that tells people who are interested in the book what kind of stuff they might find in the book. Because picking up a cookbook, especially one without photos, mine's got a bunch of drawings in it. It's all my artwork, but it doesn't have any photography. So it might be kind of hard to tell, I don't know, is this something I'm actually gonna like and want to eat? So I like to give people a sample of the type of food that I make and the type of recipes that are in there. And I also just love to share food with people. I think that's a way to really engage with people. And in terms of meeting people in a place like a bookstore or like Vegan Republic, like you were saying, with people that you don't know, food's always a great icebreaker, right?
I don't know if you know this, Ashley, but Animal Place Vegan Republic, they closed. For those who have never heard of that, it's an all vegan mini grocery store in Berkeley. They closed, but the organization, the Farm Sanctuary, they're still around. But this store closed. And also, tell us about your Fat Bottom Baker.
Yeah, so Fat Bottom Bakery was a small business that I had for about 5 years. So it was myself and a good friend, my friend Carolyn, who at one point were just kind of thinking, we were both home bakers and kind of frustrated with work and trying to figure out what we wanted to really do. And we both thought, it would be awesome baking for a living. We were baking a lot together at that time anyway, and we started baking and tabling at events and at shows. So again, Fat Bottom Bakery was initially rooted in kind of DIY culture as well. We're baking out of our home kitchen. We were setting up tables at Gilman and selling little cupcakes for $1. And over time, it became something that we felt like we could actually turn into, a livelihood and make a living off of it. So we were able to get a commercial kitchen space here in West Oakland, and we did catering and events and sold to cafes and markets around the Bay Area for about 5 years.
Was this like an actual like baking store, like people could come in and order stuff? Like
So
sit down?
we did not have a storefront because it was just the two of us. And what we really wanted to focus on was getting our stuff not only to individuals who wanted to place orders, but also to the broader Bay Area. So places like markets, we had stuff at Phil's Coffee and smaller local coffee shops. And at that time, this was close to 10 years ago now, which maybe doesn't sound like that long, but in terms of vegan stuff, the amount of difference that there is from 2010 to 2020 in terms of things being accessible, like broadly everywhere, it's been a huge change. And so at that time, it felt really important to just be able to get those options out to people through that avenue.
By any chance, did you go to the book fair up here to set up table, like the anarchist book fair up here?
I don't think we ever tabled at the anarchist book fair. But we did like lots of smaller events, like I said, shows. We did like one of the zine fests one year. So definitely overlap in those communities.
All right. Speaking of anarchism, you and your partner were involved with the AK Press Collective. How long were you involved with the AK Press?
So let's see. I actually came to AK Press as an intern, which might sound kind of funny, but I moved to Oakland from Santa Cruz, where I was going to college. For this internship, I had kind of finagled my way into convincing my school that was something that I could get a thesis out of. And so I moved to Oakland, did a 6-month-long full-time internship there where I wasn't a collective member. I was just sort of helping support operations and also learning how they operated, because I was writing about workers' cooperatives and collectives, and then ended up just really falling in love with it. So I worked there for about 4 years total.
And many years ago, you were also involved with the punk rock collective called AGC in Los Angeles, which stands for Alternative Gathering Collective. Could you tell us about that and what you guys did and everything?
Yeah. So that's where I met you, actually, and a lot of people who ended up being really important to me. So AGC put on benefit shows and also speaker events. So we had folks from the Black Panthers come and speak. We raised money for families of victims of police brutality. We participated in other larger political events where we would table. And actually, some of the shows that we did were some of the first places that I cooked for other people when I very first was vegan. So I was a teenager growing up in LA and had just kind of started to learn how to cook and put stuff together. And I remember really distinctly, I had this macaroni and cheese recipe, which now sounds totally weird because there's like, now I'd use like cashew cheese or something that sounds a little bit more delicious, but it had tofu in it. And I don't know, people bought it. Like we had a little space, a community center where we'd have shows a lot, and it had a little commercial kitchen, and me and some of the collective members would cook and sell food as a benefit. And I did that for a couple of years and learned both how to cook and also how to do some fundraising and collective organizing too.
Ashley, I have to mention that you have a really cool father, because your dad used to bring you to the weekly meetings in front of like 20 to 30 punk rockers. And he even took you to protest. I see your dad coming to protest. That was so cool.
That is true. And my dad actually got hit in the face with a rubber bullet at one of those protests.
Yes. What protest was that? I remember that one.
It was one of the October 22nd marches against police brutality way back. And my dad my dad came with me. He showed up and, got a little taste of it.
Yeah, that was crazy. That was a long time ago. I remember there were so many rubber bullets flying. But so you were involved with activism down in LA and up here and stuff. What are the difference with the whole activism and the punk scene in Northern California and Southern California? Do you see anything different?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I mean, in LA, like we were talking about, I was involved with AGC, and that was a specifically punk rock collective, which I think was really cool. And that was kind of what brought me into it as a teen, when I was kind of learning politics more, but already really solidly, knew that I loved and cared about punk. Up here, I don't think this is like any kind of a rule about how things are different down there and up here, but in my personal experience in my life, being up in the Bay Area, the music scene and my political involvement have been a little bit more separate. So working at AK Press, I don't know if we said this, but that's an anarchist collective. It's a workers' cooperative and collectively run publishing and distribution company. And so that was a big part of my activism and political involvement at that time when I was there. And I was, of course, still into punk, still going to shows, and kind of involved in that scene, but they weren't as enmeshed, not overlapping in the same way for me.
Did you get into veganism at first when you first got into it? Was it for health reason or animal rights reason or environmentalism, or was it just everything?
So it ended up being everything. When I first got into it, so I was pretty young. I was 14 when I decided to become vegetarian, and that was just, I would honestly say that at that time, that was a little bit of a whim. It was like, okay, I have this feeling that this is something that I should try out and check out. And, decided like, no, I'm not going to eat meat anymore. And then what happened was, as soon as I started looking into vegetarian food and vegetarian politics, I started learning about veganism and learned about factory farming and the environmental impacts and the horrible ethical ramifications of it, and realized really fast, like within a couple of months, that I felt like I couldn't be vegetarian and I had to be vegan. It didn't feel right to me to, eat dairy and eggs. So the more I looked into it, the more firmly into animal rights that I became invested. And then also over time, and especially right now, as we're really seeing the impacts of climate change directly, I realize, more and more how important it is to be vegan, or at least eat plant-based as much as possible for the environment too.
Ashley, before you go, what are some of your favorite vegan food?
Ooh, so some of my favorite food to make, I still do a lot of baking. I'm about to actually go bake some pumpkin bread after I stop talking to you here, because it's October now and that sounds good. I love to do the stuffed shells recipe that's in my book. I think that's something that's really good, either for a nice home meal or to take to potlucks and stuff like that, because a lot of people enjoy it and it feels a little fancy. And we're lucky to have so many good restaurants around here. I would say some of my favorite stuff is honestly simple stuff like falafel, but also I love everyone's different take on a vegan Caesar salad. That's one of my favorite things to order out.
Ashley, I like everything. Anything that's vegan, I like everything. But Ashley from Barefoot in the Kitchen, thank you very much.
Thank you.